Hey everybody, Nikki the Death Doula here. I deeply apologize. I have not had the time or ability to record a new podcast episode for this week. However, I am going to give you a rebroadcast of one of my prior episodes. I like to go in and look every now and then and see what my most downloaded episode was. And it has always been my second episode ever, what to say and what not to say to someone who's grieving. And then second to that would be the time I replayed that again the next year. But my episode number 80, How to Talk to Somebody Who is Dying, has just blown those two right out of the water. So that is now my highest downloaded episode. So I thought I would go ahead and replay that today, since it seemed like people are getting something out of that. And I will be back with a new episode next week, I promise. And I have some great interviews coming up with some really cool people that I can't wait to share. But I just have not had the capability or time to really get a new, and I don't want to just put something out there just to put something out there, which is, I guess, kind of what I'm doing right now. But I want to make sure that when I do a full new episode that I give the time and attention it deserves, because you all deserve a great episode. So I thank you all so much for your patience. I love each and every one of you, and I'm so grateful that you are here and you are listening to my show. So without further ado, here is my rebroadcast of How to Talk to Somebody Who is Dying. Hello, and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today we are going to be talking about how to talk to somebody who is dying. This is a question I get asked a lot. I don't know why it didn't strike me to do an episode on this before, but I get asked this question a lot. And I did see an article on it a while back too, and it struck me as like, oh yeah, this is a question I get asked. And I had it just kind of on my list of topic ideas for a while, and it just worked out that that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into today's episode, a couple super fast things. I have been meaning to, and I'm so sorry I keep forgetting, a couple shout outs. There's a great podcast out there called The Path to Motherhood, which I cannot recommend enough. Such a great show. She is just a lovely human being. But I have spoken with Sarah, who runs this podcast, and she is just a beautiful human. This podcast is all about navigating infertility and becoming a mother and, the path to having children. So I would love for you to listen to it if that is your thing. If it's not, that's okay. You don't have to. But if you know somebody that might enjoy it, pass it on to them too. Sarah's a lovely human being, like I said, and her podcast, I listened to a couple episodes, even though, again, it's not really geared towards me, but it doesn't matter. I have other podcasts I follow that might not be geared toward me, but I love them anyway. You know what? I'll go ahead and give another shout out to my dear friend Heidi B., who I've met several times. She lives here in Columbus. She's a divorce coach, divorce planner, and she has a podcast about divorce. And she's a comeback coach. It's really more about your life after divorce. And I'm well past my divorce, and I'm very happily into my second marriage now. But I still love her show. She has such cool guests on there, and she has such great stories about getting in touch with yourself and being a new you. So even though it's not really geared towards me, I still enjoy it. You can listen to podcasts if it's not really directed right at you. You're allowed. I give you permission. If anybody asks, you just say, Nikki the Death Doula says it's okay. All right. So there's 2 more podcasts you can add to your list if you are so inclined. But more importantly, listen to mine and share mine. Tell your friends about mine. Honestly, that's the best thing you can do for me. If you don't want to join my Patreon, if you don't want to give me any money, that's okay. Just tell somebody about my podcast. Share it on social media, or better yet, go in and leave a review for me. Leave a 5-star review. Leave a couple words about why you enjoy this show. That would help me out more than anything else. That is how people find me. So that's how these stupid algorithms work, you guys. It's the dumb world we're living in, but here we are. And since I mentioned it, I have to go ahead and bring up my Patreon real quick. Patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. Depending on which tier you sign up for, you get a shout out on my show. I'll say your name. I do have a new Patreon. Well, I had a Patreon and a returning Patreon. Hi, Tracy. Tracy's a lovely human and I love her to death. Hi, Tracy. Yeah, if you want me to shout out your name and you want to support me in what I do, maybe get early access to the show and some grief affirmations and check-ins, which I've totally forgot to record for this month. So sorry, everybody. And some other bonus content. You get access to my workshops for free or discounted price. Go check that out. Patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. Okay, enough of that. Let's dive in. So again, this is a question I get asked a lot as a death doula. How do I talk to somebody who's dying? And we're going to talk about this in different stages too, like how to talk to somebody who is recently diagnosed or recently starting hospice versus how to talk to somebody who is in active dying and like are at their final days, hours, minutes. I don't know if I need to put trigger warnings on this episode. I'm kind of bad about remembering to do that sometimes, but obviously we're talking about death in this episode. So if that bothers you, I'm not entirely sure why you listen to a podcast about loss, but hey, maybe you're not comfortable with death, but loss is I don't know. I will not question it, but we are talking about dying. I'm not going to go into specifics, but know that. Okay. So regardless of where this person is in their journey towards the end of their life, a few key points to remember when you're talking with them is try not to make this about you would be one of my number one suggestions, right? And I'm not saying you can't talk about yourself. That's fine. Be yourself. And we'll get to that in a second. But don't turn this around to you, especially if you feel like you are going to be too overly emotional. Maybe wait to speak to them until you're feeling a little calmer. Because, and you're perfectly allowed to cry in front of them and be emotional. Again, we'll get to that in a second. But if you're going to be not helpful and a mess and making it all about how their death is affecting you, that's probably not going to be the gentlest way to speak with them. So just remember that. And it's okay to talk about how their death might impact you, but let's not make that the main focus of the conversation. Okay? You're here for them. You're here for their loved ones, their family. And you're there for yourself too. You're there for some closure. You're there maybe to say goodbye if that's where we are in the stage of things, or you're there to process your side of this loss because they're suffering a loss and you're suffering a loss, and they're going to be different. I always say everybody's grief is different, right? So just something to keep in mind. But let's don't make the entire conversation about you. I bring this up in my most popular episode, apparently, both times I've played it, on how to talk to people who are grieving. And I always say, don't make it about you. If somebody's like just lost their mother, don't say, oh, I lost my mom too. I know exactly how you feel. And oh, I just lost my brother last week and I'm so distraught and oh, woe is me, and on and on and on, just completely changing the subject over to you. So that's what we're trying to avoid. You can talk about yourself. Again, we'll get to that in a second, but, the second, most important thing I would say is be yourself. I said that a moment ago. You don't have to be super reserved. You don't have to hide who you are. You don't have to hide your relationship with this person. Be yourself. Don't talk to them any differently than you ever did before. If you guys had running jokes, keep going with those running jokes. Make jokes, chat about your usual things, be comfortable. I can't imagine if I were talking to a friend and I was, a month away from death or whatever, I'm in the end of my life, and somebody comes in and they're just staring at me and they're scared to say anything. And this is a person that I have told endless fart jokes with. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I like a good fart joke. But if this is one of those people that we used to share off-color disgusting jokes with each other or make mildly offensive comments to each other, and they came in and they were afraid to even tell a single joke, I would be like, what is going on? Make me laugh. This is you and I. This is what we do. So just be comfortable. And I know it can be uncomfortable, especially if they're in active dying, if they're within hours of the end of their life and they're not communicative, or maybe they're making odd noises with their breathing, which will happen, or just the room vibe feels off, or it can be an uncomfortable situation, but just try to overcome that and just be yourself. And don't be afraid of the elephant in the room. I guarantee you, your friend or this person you're speaking with didn't forget they're dying. Okay? They didn't forget they have a diagnosis. If you're talking to them months out and they're still communicative, you're not going to remind them of their death. And I say this about grief too. You're not going to remind somebody that they suffered a loss. Don't worry. They didn't forget. Just like the person you're talking to now did not forget they're dying. I promise you they didn't forget that. But I would also kind of get a feel from their caregivers, or just, read the room if you're able, to see how much awareness they might have about where they are in their stage and what their diagnosis is. And this isn't as much an issue in Western cultures, but in some Eastern cultures and some Asian cultures, they may not tell their family member that they're dying. And I know that sounds weird. Please don't gasp and freak out about this. This is just the way their cultures run. The burden is supposed to go on the children, not the parents, okay? And I respect that. And if that is a culture you are in where maybe they have not told their loved one that they are actually dying, respect that, okay? But also there might be a case of Alzheimer's or dementia or some other thing that has altered their cognition, so they might not be fully aware of exactly what's going on, or that they are dying or going to be dying very shortly. So kind of get an awareness for that. But as long as they're aware and everybody's cool with it, don't be afraid to talk about the fact that, yes, this person is about to die. Okay? Again, I guarantee you they didn't forget. They might even feel a little bit of relief with that. They might be surrounded by people and caregivers all day long that are just pussyfooting around, tiptoeing, walking on eggshells, and they don't want to talk about it. And this person may want to. They might want to talk about their diagnosis. They might want to talk about how scared they are and that they're dying. And oh my God, please just talk to me. Be honest with me. They might really appreciate that. If your friend or the person you're speaking with is early on and they're, at diagnosis or just starting hospice, ask them how they feel about it. And this is going back to the, don't be afraid to talk about it. They didn't forget. Ask them how they're feeling. Like, are you doing okay with this? Like, how do you feel about, again, assuming they know they've only got a month left or 2 months left or 6 months left or a year. How are you feeling about your prognosis and your length of life left? Are you okay? So don't be afraid to ask them how they're feeling and if they're coping with it. Now with that, don't be afraid of them talking about it. If you can't handle them being blunt with you, maybe don't ask the question. But be prepared, and again, going back to don't make this about you, be prepared to listen, okay? Just sit back and let them go. Let them talk. And again, if you are asking this question, ask it because you honestly care about the answer. A lot of times people might ask this in a dismissive way, or just like, yeah, how you handling this? You okay? Oh, don't actually talk to me about it. If you're trying to be there to support them, do that. And the number one thing you can do, and I've mentioned this in my talking to people who are grieving, is just listen, let them talk. And don't try to fix this, because surprise, there's not really fixing it. Honestly, the only fixing you can do is maybe helping them be more prepared, helping them feel ready about facing the end of their life. Just let them talk and don't try to fix the problem, because you can't, okay? So if they are at a point where this is your final visit and you are saying goodbye and you're saying what will be your last words to this person, we're not writing novels here. None of us are Walt Whitman or insert your favorite author or poet here, okay? What you're saying to them does not have to be profound. You don't have to send them off with these perfect final words, okay? Because just let that go. After everything I've just said about how to talk to somebody when they're dying, don't make this about you. Don't make this, just be yourself, Tell them that one last fart joke, if that's your thing. Or just tell them how much they meant to you and how much you'll miss them and you love them so much. Just be yourself. Don't worry about getting those words perfect. Believe me, I've been around several people now, and I have said some kind of maybe not perfect things. I've never said anything cruel or awful or anything, but believe me, I've said some dumb things to people who are dying. I can remember going to visit somebody when I was younger who I knew was going to pass, and I said, "Feel better," which, or I think it was like, "Get some rest, hope you feel better," which, wow. Anyway, that was pretty stupid, but I'm like, I beat myself up. I was younger at that time, and I didn't know what I knew now. And I was at that point where a lot of people are, where you just don't know what to say. And when you visit somebody who's sick in the hospital, that's something you would say. Get some rest, man. Hope you feel better. Sorry you're going through this. You're going to come out on the other side. Well, I mean, this person may come out on another side, but not this one. So, but if you don't know what to say, don't say anything. Okay? This is the same with addressing somebody who's grieving. If you don't know what to say, you don't have to say anything. Sometimes your words will fail you. Sometimes we're without words, and that's okay. But don't force something and have it come out weird or forced or silly, okay? And again, if you are at that time and you're saying goodbye and you do break down and you do start to cry, that's okay. And, I said at the beginning, don't make this about you, but if you're genuinely really bereft in that moment, that's okay. They're probably used to it by now. If they've been saying goodbye to a lot of people, they've probably been hearing a whole lot of sobbing. Don't be afraid, and that's okay. Don't be afraid to hug them if that's a possibility. If they are, if you are able to touch them or hug them. We'll get to touching and hugging and all that here in just a minute, but it's okay if you can hug them, touch them, whatever your relationship comfort level is. And this is a good part for me to throw in why you might want to have an end-of-life doula or somebody you really trust around in your final days. I'm not a real touchy-feely person. I don't like to be touched a lot. I don't mind a hug at all, and I don't mind a hand hold here and there. I don't mind a shoulder touch, but I don't like lingering contact. It makes me uncomfortable. That's just who I am. I embrace that about myself, and I let people know this. If hugs go on 1 second too long, I start feeling real weird. If somebody wants to hold my hand for a minute, that's okay. If it goes on for a long time, I get real uncomfortable. That's just how I am, okay? I'm not a touchy-feely person, and I will really hope that that's respected if I'm unable to communicate for myself. If I'm in my deathbed and I can't say out loud, please stop touching me, I would hope somebody is present that knows that about me. So if you are one of those people, or if you love being touched a lot, if you like to have your feet rubbed or your hands touched, or little scalp massages and stuff. Again, we're going to get to touching in a second. There's a little more about that, but go for it. Let the people around you know, I want that. I want people to touch me. I want people to climb in bed with me and hug me. I want people to lay next to me and not feel weird about it. That's okay. So since I kept saying we'll get to that, let's get to that right now. When it comes to things like touching and hugging and lying next to people who are dying, that's okay if they're okay with it. First of all, consent's everything, right? Make sure somebody in the room knows if that's something they're comfortable with or not, or for sure that that's something that was a relationship you had. But depending on what their diagnosis is, what they might be dying from, or even their age, things like touch and scents and sounds can be intensified a little bit. And there might be skin issues. So if you grab something, if you squeeze somebody's hand, or you're like giving, like I'm motioning, like you can see me doing like a little hand massage or a foot massage, be cautious with that, because if their skin is very thin, it could tear, and that can cause a whole lot of other issues. Okay. You ask permission if they are communicative, or ask permission of their caregivers before you do anything like that. But you can do things like brush their hair if that's what they like. Just remember to be gentle with things like that. Their hair might be brittle. It might be falling out. But put some lotion on them. Maybe they have a nice scented lotion they loved, or something that just feels good or has some aromatherapy to it, or some properties. Lip balm's a huge one. If they're in active dying, their mouth's going to be open a lot and their lips are going to get real dry. So don't be afraid to put some lip balm on them. And if somebody's one of those people that really wants to have their lipstick on, go ahead and do that. there's nothing wrong with that. And also, like, laying in bed with them, cradling them, touching them. Just remember that same thing. First of all, make sure that that's a relationship that you guys have and that that person is comfortable with that. Don't be afraid to do that. I can't imagine not crawling into bed with my mother if and when she's on her deathbed and just snuggling up next to her, because that's my mommy. Okay? But also, again, be careful. Okay? If they're in hospice and they're dying, there's not going to be tubes. There's not going to be IVs or anything you have to worry about. So don't worry about that. But just be cautious of skin. Or if they've been lying for a while, they may have bed sores that are uncomfortable. So jostling them too much could tear their skin. So just be in communication with their hospice team or their doula. Okay? Communication is key. Consent is key. But as long as all that's a go, do it. Now, I've kind of given both sides of a lot of these things on if they're, in diagnosis or in active dying. Let's go down and talk about when people are in active dying. If they are at that point where they're at the end of life, when you approach somebody in a room, tell them who you are, that you're there, let them know you're there. They can hear you. That's another question I get asked a lot, is that, can they hear me? Yes, they can. They can absolutely hear you. Sometimes if they can't verbally respond, they might physically respond to you. We get, as doulas and hospice workers, we get really used to seeing those tiny nonverbal cues, and we can see those that you might not be able to see, especially if we've been watching them for days on end. You get to know their little cues. But talk out loud so that they can hear you. Hearing is, like I said, they can hear you. Hearing is the last sense that we lose. And tell them you're there. Tell them who you are. And if you're going to touch them, tell them first. Say, I'm going to pick up your hand. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to brush your hair. Any time you're going to touch them in any way, tell them first. Because there's nothing like imagine if you're in that, like right before you fall asleep and you're kind of half asleep and then somebody just walks up and grabs your hand. It would scare the crap out of you, wouldn't it? It would scare the crap out of you. I promise. So don't startle them. Don't just dive in and start yelling. Okay. Let them know you're there, who you are. And again, just be yourself. Talk to them. Just keep in mind that their state of consciousness is not going to be similar to talking to somebody who's wide awake and totally lucid. Right? It might be a little like a dreamlike state for them. So be gentle in your speaking. Don't come in. I mean, again, you can be yourself. You can tell a funny joke, but don't run in and start screaming or singing or talking real loud and just be a little calmer, a little easier with your speaking. Okay? Whatever you do, and this is a big don't start talking about things like the funeral and the plans for the party and for God's sake, please don't talk about the will while somebody is dying. I would hope anybody listening to this would be well above that. But sweet Lord, don't go in and start asking about like, who's going to get the car? Wow. Let's have some respect there. But also, again, like the funeral, maybe they have something really cool planned and that's fine, but that's like talking about a party you're going to that they were not invited to. So just leave that stuff out of it for now, okay? It exists, it's going to happen, but let's wait until we're out of the room for that, okay? So that's about it. I've got, and a lot of this is contingent on who the person is, what they were like, what your relationship with them is. And if you find yourself in this situation where you're with somebody who is dying and you don't know what to say, reach out to me. Let's have a quick conversation. I'd be happy to walk you through some tips and tricks. But if not me, just talk to the people who are caring for this person. If it's their spouse, their kids, their hospice team, talk to them. They're pros, especially your hospice team are pros. They've been at this for a while. They do this for a living. They literally do it all day, every day. So they'll have some good thoughts and tips for you, okay? Just remember to be yourself, be gentle. Don't be afraid. This person's still them. They're just in a different state, and they'll soon to be in a very, very different state that we don't fully understand, okay? Okay. Thank you, guys. So we are now at the end of the episode, so it is time for The Death Deck. Woot! I'm actually pulling from the End of Life deck. So, yay. The EOL deck, as it were. I had these in my Death Cafe last month, and everybody was just like, where did you get these and where can I get them? You can get them at thedeathdeck.com. I think you can get them on Amazon as well. I would go straight to the source. It feels like it's a small company. You know, they are amazing people. I would start with them. All right. Now, on special occasions, and this is after you are dead, on special occasions, how could your family honor you? A, lighting a candle and sharing a nice memory. B, visiting the location of my final resting place. Or C, bringing family and friends together to partake in my favorite meal. Oh, well, shout out to Andrew at Our Last Meal Podcast on C there. And honestly, I would say that for me. C, absolutely, 100%. I want you all to get together and have fun and do something I would have found fun. If you are not that kind of person and you want to just sit and talk about, memories of me and light a little candle, that's fine too. You're honoring me, and I'm touched that I would be remembered at all. And if I'm not, that's okay too. But if I am remembered, I just hope it's nicely. I just hope y'all have nice things to say about me after I'm gone. But if you really, honest to God, want to honor me, get together and do something I would do. Go for a hike. Go outside and have a picnic. Just be in nature. Hug a tree. Plant a tree. Man, planting a tree would be great. But eat some nachos while you do it and drink some bourbon, because those are my favorite things. So says I. All right. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find me on the socials. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Nikki the Death Doula. My website is nikkithedeathdoula.com. Please feel free to reach out to me there. And I would love to have you as a patron on my Patreon, patreon.com/nikkithedeathdoula. You get access to my podcast a week early, and grief affirmations, and Q&As, and all sorts of other bonus content. You can see videos of my interviews with people. All in all, it's great for everybody. I get some money out of it, and all in all, it's just a win-win situation. And you'd be supporting me, which is the biggest win of all, right? All right, that's enough. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you're having an awesome week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck.